Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing a very strong climbing team in the Open Master League centered around one of my favorite Pokemon, Legacy Kyurem. This team I had amazing results with today. I won over 70% of my games, and I was battling against some elite battlers in the Master League, and I was able to climb back to the global leaderboards, top 500 ranked in the world. The team is a Dusk main lead, Kyurem as the safe switch to lure out any potential dragon counters, and Palkia Origin in the back. And this team, even against some hard counters, performed amazingly well. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's take a look at the team in action. We're starting off with a tough lead Duskmane versus Zygarde. I safe switch into Kyurem. Opponent is going to bank a little bit of energy, and in comes Duskmane Necrozma. This is not a bad Pokemon to bait out, as sometimes they will run Outrage, and Outrage is a big problem for Palkia. This, of course, is a bad situation for Kyurem. They don't farm up to the Sunsteel because they're actually running Outrage and Iron Head, a rare Duskmane that is not running Sunsteel Strike. But even in a terrible matchup, I'm able to debuff their attack, I can land some charge moves, get some chip damage in, and now I get to use this as an opportunity to get a massive amount of farm on Duskmane. So now, when my opponent sends back in the Zygarde, I have a Sunsteel Strike ready to go, and this is going to do quite a lot of damage. So I will fire off the Sunsteel Strike, opponent is going to no-shield, in comes Palkia, in the back is a Xerneas, and I've been completely hard-countered. I had a team with Double Dragon, and they had a Steel type and a Fairy back there. But you know what? I am not going to give up, because this team is incredibly powerful even when it's not in good alignment. I am going to commit the shield as they go for the Moonblast. As you see, the Aqua Tail plus Dragon Breath combination does a lot to Xerneas. Aqua Tail number 2 is actually able to grab a shield from the opponent, and now I'm already firing off yet another Aqua Tail. I'm able to grab both shields from my opponent, farming up energy to switch, and the catch of what I'm hoping will be the Moonblast. But the opponent read the catch, they went for the close combat, back in comes Palkia, and I'm using my final shield. They're going to fire off the close combat, they're going to need to switch, in comes Zygarde, I'm farming up, and I'm playing to the CMP tie. I need this Aqua Tail to KO, it's only neutral damage, it does KO, in comes the Xerneas, Palkia gets to the Aqua Tail, and if this KOs, we just overcame a hard counter game. Aqua Tail KOs, hard counter does not matter, we get the win anyway. We get way better lead in the next match, leading Duskmane into Tapu Bulu, and this is an incredibly good lead. Tapu Bulu, Nature's Madness, Grass Knot, I'm not too worried about it, but guess what? They have Mega Horn, and that does massive damage. In comes Palkia, I will fire off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse is going to connect, and now I send in Kyurem. With Kyurem, I'm just going to go for a one shield farm down, because I know Kyurem's energy is going to be very valuable into the Tapu Bulu. Again, it's a dragon that has ice coverage, so it's unique to a lot of other Pokemon that you're going to find in the meta. Because if my opponent sends back in the Tapu Bulu, which they do, this is a very healthy Tapu Bulu. However, Glaciate is going to do a ton of damage. I go for the Glaciate, that does massive damage here. I could have Dragon Clawed. I went for the Glaciate because I was a little bit expecting them to shield, but they end up no shielding, and in the back, they have Dawn Wings. Dawn Wings is going to look for the farm down, but Kyurem makes another Glaciate, and now their Dawn Wings has a permanent debuff applied. I don't want to give them farm, so I'm just going to switch into Duskmane, and now I can just let these Shadow Claws absolutely shred through my opponent's remaining HP. They're going to be forced to fire off energy. Throwing a move with Duskmane would be a mistake. At this point, I can just win the game purely off fast moves. So, they're going to be able to knock me out, but I can send in the Palkia, get the Dragon Breath down, and take the win. Duskmane finds another positive lead in the next match as I lead into Dialga. Opponent safe switches to Palkia. I don't have a hard check to this safe switch, so what I'm going to do is just stay in here and fire off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse gets shielded by my opponent, and now I'm just going to bring in my own Palkia. If they bait, they can make a Spatial Rend, so I have a call to make here. I decide to risk it. I no-shield, and I get the bait call correct. Let's go. Now, I don't have to go down a shield in order to win the switch. It's just going to be a neutral shielding scenario, and I'm going to be able to fire a Spatial Rend. I was going to say at the Dialga, but they send, of all things, a Waterfall Primarina. Now, Primarina can be quite strong with Charm, but with Waterfall, it actually is a very poor matchup against Palkia, because it has zero fast move pressure. Like, they're going to throw Waterfall after Waterfall, and look at this. They're actually going to have to shield. A double resisted Spatial Rend would do enough here that they would basically get knocked out. They're forced to burn a shield in a type advantage matchup. Now I can send out Necrozma, I will commit the shield, and we know that they are going to be looking to send in that Dialga. I switch into the Kyurem, hoping to outpace, but I threw a Shadow Claw before switching, and that means it's actually a CMP tie. So that was a misplay by me. I definitely should have just switched instantly instead of throwing the Shadow Claw, because then I would have been able to outpace. And now I'm in a position where if I Sunsteel, this could have KO'd. So I should have Sunsteeled here. I end up trying to go for double Dark Pulse, and it actually allows them to make an Iron Head, which makes the game a lot closer than it should have been. If I had just gone for the Sunsteel, that would have KO'd. They wouldn't have gotten the move, and then I could have just KO'd the Primarina. But thankfully, Duskmane is able to still tank the farm and the Iron Head, and is able to get the win. We've got a mirror lead in the next match, Duskmane versus Duskmane. Mine is Best Buddy, but the Best Buddy is not equipped. I have the Best Buddy on Palkia, because Best Buddy Palkia can help versus Origin Dialga, and as well, it's very useful for the mirror, but it's definitely something that when I run the team again, I'll probably consider Best Buddy on the Duskmane, because you will see Duskmane mirrors quite often. I'm going to farm up and fire off the Dark Pulse, and it actually looks like I win Charge Attack priority there, so a coin flip does go my way, which is quite nice. Opponent is now going to burn their final shield, so I'm just going to let this go. I am more than happy just to take energy on Palkia, because if they're leading Duskmane, they're unlikely to have a Fairy type in the back, something like a Xerneas, because then they would be ABA weak to a potential Ho-Oh. They're going to switch and send in Avalugg. If they're switching an Avalugg to an energy lead Palkia, they're very weak in the back. I could throw Aqua Tail instantly and pick up the KO, but I think energy is more valuable. So I'm not going to throw my Aqua Tail. Instead, I'm going to let them debuff me with the Icy Wind, throw 12 Dragon Breaths, and then CMP tie with the Aqua Tail. Now I can potentially make a Spatial Rend if their final Pokemon is Palkia, which is what I'm expecting. So if they send in the Palkia, I can fire off the Spatial Rend. If they bring this in, I'm going to bank some energy and then snipe with the Kyurem so I can debuff whatever's in the back. Unfortunately, I don't get to find out what was in the back, as the opponent does end up conceding the match. Great lead again for Duskmane, leading into Tapu Bulu. They throw a Bullet Seed, they save switch to Lugia, and oh my goodness, they are so weak to Duskmane. The correct play in this matchup is to Sunsteel Strike and farm down, because you can survive the Aeroblast. However, I realized that I actually make the Dark Pulse on the CMP tie to the Aeroblast because they threw a Bullet Seed before switching. So now, I'm actually going to force the shield from the opponent, shield back, and then farm all the way down. So this way, I still leave with a nice amount of energy, but now I'm just extremely healthy as well. They're going to send out Palkia, I pivot into Kyurem, and this game is immediately over. I will go for the Glaciate, even if they call this as the Glaciate and not the super effective Dragon Claw, it's fine by me. They end up committing the shield. I'm going to make the Dragon Claw. They make a nice switch to catch onto Tapu Bulu, but unfortunately for my opponent, it's just not going to be enough to save them. They don't have a shield, and I basically have a Sunsteel Strike. So I can send in Duskmane, and poor Tapu Bulu getting absolutely one-shot. In comes their Palkia, who even needs a third Pokemon in this match, and we're able to take the win. Hopping into the next match, we get a very nice up pair, and it is going to be a pretty okay lead, leading Duskmane versus Palkia. Of course, Duskmane can run Outrage. I'm not running Outrage, but I will throw on 8 to try and bluff the fact that I am running Outrage, because Outrage just straight up KOs Palkia here. So I will bluff the Outrage to grab the shield and then look to pivot into Kyurem. My opponent ends up no shielding, which is uncomfortable for me. I send in Kyurem, and they respond with their own Duskmane. Had I been able to grab a shield from that initial matchup, I would feel that I was in a much better spot, but my opponent not respecting the potential Outrage honestly puts me in a bit of an awkward position. They're going to fire off the Sunsteel Strike that picks up the KO, but they did a very nice job to overfarm before they did it to make sure they could outpace here by one Shadow Claw. That's really nice energy management by my opponent, and down a shield and down switch advantage, I basically just always lose this game, because with a Palkia lead, they're probably going to have something that can do okay into my Palkia in the back. I have to hope it's something like Landorus, but it's not. It is going to be Dialga, and there's just no playing that one out, so I will concede the match. Hopping to the next match. Okay, we get a do-over. Last Palkia lead did not respect the Outrage. They're going to switch out instantly into Landorus, and I'm going to respond with Kyurem. Kyurem takes massive damage from Stone Edge. I'm going to shield, expecting them not to bait, and they don't bait. That's incredibly good for me. I'm going to overfarm quite a bit and go for Glaciate. Glaciate is double super effective damage. Opponent does not protect the Landorus, just letting it get KO'd. They're going to send out Duskmane. Duskmane is a wall to energy from Kyurem, but Kyurem is going to be able to put up a pretty nice fight. Being able to debuff with Glaciates. Here, I should just commit to another Glaciate. I thought they were going to throw before I got there, so I ended up going for the Claw, but I had the energy for the Glaciate, so that's what I should have gone for. They send back in the Palkia. I'm going to switch out, saving that Kyurem for later, and I'm going to send in Duskmane. Their Duskmane has a ton of energy, but if they're not running Outrage, I should just be in a winning position in this game. So I will fire off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse, not going to be enough to knock out, but will do some pretty okay damage. Opponent is actually going to let that through. Again, people having zero respect for a potential Outrage. Aqua Tail will pick up the KO. I can just farm down their Palkia with mine, and then unless they themselves are running Outrage, this game is just a win. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to no-shield the first. If they have Outrage, they have me. But if they don't, I can tank a Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse is not going to be an issue, and then I'm not going to throw a charge move for the remainder of the game. They have 2 shields. I'm never going to be able to get to enough charge moves. So what I'm going to do is just get them low, switch into Kyurem, farm them down, and we take the win as the opponent, unfortunately, does not use either of their shields. We've got a mirror lead, Duskmane versus Duskmane, and the more I'm watching this footage back, the more I'm thinking I really should have run the best buddy on the Duskmane, because it's going to be a pretty common lead. Obviously, Duskmane being an incredibly powerful pick, and being able to guarantee that you always win switch, or force the opponent into going into a shield deficit in the mirror, is quite valuable. Here, I win the first coin flip, but I don't win the second, which means if I want to win switch, I am going to be forced to give up a shield. And my opponent is just never going to shield this. They are not going to risk a third coin flip that they might lose. They're just going to take shield advantage. In comes Palkia. I pivot my own. They're going to be able to outpace me here, but I'm okay with that. The important thing is the Dragon Breath damage that I get there. I just need to remove like 2/3 of their HP, because now I can farm this down with Kyurem, and they're going to be forced to switch out because they're not going to be able to make a move. I send in Kyurem, they stay in here, and to my surprise, they let themselves get farmed down. That's a rather large error, as now they're never going to be able to potentially make a catch or reset a Glaciate debuff. So even though it's resisted, I'm glaciating them, because it means that I now have a chance to potentially survive a Rock Slide here. So my opponent is going to fire off the move. The Rock Slide does not KO, and I'm going to switch and send in Duskmane. Duskmane is going to make it to the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse should be shielded by my opponent, but unfortunately for them, the writing is on the wall for this one, because they can't knock out with the Rock Slide. I'm going to be able to make it to the Dark Pulse. Opponent realizes that they do not have a win con, and they will concede the match. We move to the next game, Necrozma versus Mewtwo. Okay, this is a pretty nice lead. The Mewtwo can win the 2s, but only with a double bait. However, Shadow Ball does a massive amount of damage, so it's awkward to try and call a bait here. I shield, and I get baited. Oh, that is really unfortunate. I'm going to farm up and fire off the Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse is going to be shielded. I think maybe if they double bait, if I don't throw a move and just fully farm down, then maybe I can still win the 2s. But here, unfortunately, they're able to make the last second Shadow Ball, so I'm forced to switch out and catch the Shadow Ball onto Kyurem. Kyurem going to be able to absorb that damage. In comes Dialga, and Dialga just does not get the farm down as I'm able to make the Dragon Claw. And that wasn't even damage registration error. I actually just survived that, which was nice. So now I can send in my Duskmane and fire off the Sunsteel. This is very close to KOing here. The Sunsteel just does not KO. Dialga tanks it on 1 and makes the Iron Head. That is unfortunate. The good news is it's just an Iron Head, so it doesn't do a lot. And they have their own Duskmane in the back. So this game is honestly looking pretty good. I fire off the Dark Pulse, get the shield, and now I switch into Palkia. If they have Outrage, it's over, but I wasn't seeing a lot of Outrage Necrozmas, so I will fire off the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail will do some very nice damage, and this is going to be a very tricky game of energy management. How much can they overfarm? They're farming up past the move. I go for the Aqua Tail, and they get the catch. Oh, that is just an absolutely back-breaking catch. I should have been more careful and not let my opponent catch. The thing is, though, they're still, I believe, 2 off the move. And 2 Shadow Claws could KO here. So I send in Duskmane, and they live on 1 HP. Had I been more careful and not let them catch, that would have been a win. But unfortunately, I was sloppy in my play, and it comes back to bite me in a big way, as I do end up taking the loss. Hopping into the final match, Duskmane versus Palkia. I'm going to play it how I have been playing it, which is build up to 8, bait the potential outrage, wait for them to throw, and then send in Kyurem. So I bait the potential outrage, and 0 opponents were respecting the outrage, man. Apparently, I just need to TM outrage back on my Duskmane, because people are not giving it any respect whatsoever. I'm going to send out Kyurem here. I will commit the shield as my opponent does make it to a Spatial Rend. They will go for the Spatial Rend, and they send out Ho-Oh. And this is honestly terrific for me. Because if they're sending out Ho-Oh, I'm expecting the third is going to be Landorus. And if that's the case, then my Palkia has a ton of play. Here my opponent makes a pretty big mistake. They weren't familiar with the energy counts on Kyurem, or maybe just weren't quite sure where my energy was at, and they end up going to 100 energy, which allows me to make a second Glaciate and force a shield. They're debuffed, but I can't farm down in 5 Dragon Breaths, so I'm just going to bring in the Duskmane, throw 2 Shadow Claws, and then go for the Dark Pulse. This does mean that the Incinerate damage does register, but I should be able to snipe if they send in the Palkia. They bring in Dawn Wings, and this is exactly how you beat Dawn Wings as Palkia. You win the 1 shield straight Aqua Tail. Going for a Spatial Rend in a 1-shield scenario is a strict misplay by the Palkia, because you just don't need to. By the time you get to the second Aqua Tail, the Aqua Tail will be enough to KO. I just have to throw it in the middle of their Shadow Claw so they aren't able to catch. This is just enough damage to knock out. All they have left is the very low health Palkia in the back, and we're able to take the win, and that concludes the 11-4 run with the team. All in all, I think that the pairing of Kyurem and Duskmane is an incredibly strong one, and I do think that the release of Duskmane does bring Kyurem back to the meta in a pretty large way. After the release of Palkia Origin in February, it did get a bit more difficult to run Kyurem, not necessarily because the Kyurem matchup into Palkia was so terrible, but due to the fact that Palkia plus Landorus core was everywhere, and the best core pairing for Kyurem was Solgaleo, and Solgaleo really struggles against both Landorus and Palkia, so it left Kyurem in an awkward spot of having to 1v2 in a lot of situations, and that really just ended up being a bit too much for it. However, since Duskmane has released and Duskmane is a lot more neutral into Palkia, this means that Kyurem doesn't have to 1v2 as frequently, and that can allow it to really be a powerful contributor. We saw quite a few times, Kyurem's energy is very flexible, even against the fairy types, which is something that not a lot of the other dragon types are able to do, is consistently hit the fairies, and in addition, being able to debuff them as well, so that you can potentially survive moves that previously would knock you out. I think it's just a really terrific setup Pokemon, and makes for a really nice safe switch, even in a meta where there is a new Psychic Steel type like Duskmane running rampant. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.